it doesn't really, I mean, if it something comes out, that's great. If not, it's not a big deal. I'm not super.
Well, I think we want like sound bites from it. Like, you could say, "Will you shut up and let me speak?"
That's what I was hoping for. I was hoping to get some good memes out of it. As long as we get memes, we're okay. And then it will have been worth it, because I think people are really all in it for just only that anyway. So, but yeah, I just brought this because it was the kind of. It's fun.
Yeah.
It's fun sound. Fun having it.
Yeah, no, it's cool. You're lucky. I am envious of you having an instrument that you have an intimacy with, that you can bring somewhere. It's not most pianists. I can't. I don't, unless I have some remarkable servant staff that can haul a piano behind me wherever I go. Okay, put it over there.
Yeah. Or get comfortable with the melodica.
Yeah, which getting comfortable, that's the big catch. I think it's a pretty obnoxious instrument. So,
there's meme number 1.
So I've kind of been a witness to this whole project on your part, and it's been quite I don't know, quite revelatory to me in terms of all the facets of it, and you've undertaken so many dimensions of it. I guess first off, there's a recording aspect to it, there is the writing aspect to it, there's the performance aspect to it, and if you were to put your finger on when you think this specific material and the undertaking began, how long ago did you start working on this material?
Oh, well, some of it started back in 2003 even. I used to live over on Spade Street.
Yeah.
I had that house with Amelia and India, and at one point with Hans, and I had access to, actually Amelia had a couple of acoustic guitars up there, and while I had my other rig with electric guitars and the Fender Rhodes that you found in that barn that one day, and the computer setup and all that kind of stuff, I just started playing around with acoustic guitars. I was like, man, this sounds so superior in a way, because it was just this beautiful big wooden sound, and so I just started kind of chipping away at that, half of the time, and half of the time, of course, cranking up the amplifier and doing things in order to record the Optimistic. But one of the things that I did have a chance to kind of discover, I guess, is I was like, I've been working on trying to sing. Up until that point, I had been only kind of doing like backup vocals and with the takeoff stuff, having Scott do the the vocals up to that point, but he was gone. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna kind of give it a go. So the first tune I learned how to do was "Don't Think Twice, It's All Right," the Bob Dylan song.
Wow.
And right off the bat, I was like, man, what if you do this in the relative minor? And that's why that first track on the record was that way. So when the choice to have that be the first song on the album for me was like, this is really the most fitting introduction, because for me personally, it was just exactly how I started trying to do it. Started trying to sing on my own and play. So and then as we went along, the Fingers, we had this country band, and that was probably like, I don't know, 2007, and then we finally put out an album, a few years later. And so through the course of that, I got better and better, and had a whole bunch of songs that probably might have even been on a second album of that. But I was like, well, that wasn't going to happen, so I just started putting it together. So between that and then also kind of other songs, a couple of tunes, writing along the way, and that was it. So over a long amount of time actually, and then finally, I would say, you know, this whole thing's probably taken about 7 years, but because everything kind of was built up from scratch, I had to find the right instruments, and that was just like a constant thing, you know, finding a guitar and figuring out what I wanted, finding out that wasn't the right guitar, getting another guitar, and another.
So when, like, in the example you just gave in terms of finding guitars, what is it that led you to determine that you needed a different sound? Was it in your mind's ear? Did it come out of your developing your engineering understandings and acoustic understandings? Like, where did that come from?
Well, two things really, and actually, I would say it kind of started with the fingers, actually, kind of as the first reason, which was when we were doing, we tried to do some shows with Optimistic. We did a bunch of them, and they were so loud, and I was like, man, I can't reach that feeling that I could when I was just working on these songs at home. And I started to realize, man, I would need like a sound system and somebody to run it and have to deal with all this shit. And I just, you know, I felt, in a way, I think I was just moving towards trying to be more independent, not having more and more people to be dependent on to make the whole thing work. And so by when we could just play, and a bunch of us with not even really any amps for the most part, a couple of us in the fingers just playing in a room, it's like, man, just playing acoustic guitars and just singing, it was great. So when the beginning of this, when this started to happen, it was about kind of a challenge, I guess. Like, if I wanted to play completely by myself, just playing on acoustic guitar and singing, could I do it? Could I find something interesting to do on the guitar? Could it be, you know, rather than, like, I think my skills were relatively limited as well. So in a way, it was kind of a good challenge to, you know, figure out a new way to play the instrument as well. So, you know, instead of you strum or you play riffs and then you play guitar solos over the top of something else that's happening. Well, now there's nothing in there. There's only space. So I was like, okay, can I figure out something to do? So kind of bringing in, you know, some of the information that I had through learning jazz, and maybe a little bit peripherally being aware of what classical guitar players did, you know, and actually kind of looking towards more minimalistic ways of playing, so I could just play a bass note and a melody note maybe, and do something maybe slower also, and then maybe have like some movement, but that's not necessarily super flashy and super you know, trying to get your attention with lots of hot licks and stuff like that. It's like, oh, okay, I can make relatively simple things happen. No, not even necessarily have to do large chording and so on and so forth. So in a way, it was about bringing it down to the most minimalistic floor that you could have, which really meant being comfortable with silence, you know, just being cool with just allowing, like, if in the song you got to a point where you let a note drift off and nothing was happening, that's part of the song. Like, as opposed to always feeling the need to fill up every little space. And then, of course, building it up from there. Otherwise, if it was like, you know, if the floor was higher, then my ceiling was not going to change. I wasn't going to be able to do anything more. You know, I wasn't going to be like Tommy Emmanuel. I don't know if you know who that is, but, you know, amazing guitar player who can play like, you know, 3 or 4 parts at the same time, and just ridiculous and beautiful, you know. But that wasn't the aesthetic anyway. So I don't know. That's a long-winded answer.
Well, no, but I also, it's like when I think about it, I realize you want to bring some kind of individual characteristic to each tune. So you're going to be thinking in terms of your instrumentation, how you play. We've bounced off personally. I mean, we had always remarked, like a band like the Beatles, who were very good at creating imprinted kind of associations with songs that were more than just the melody. It was what was going on in the arrangement that brought it out. Or the Beach Boys, where that also was a characteristic.
Yeah.
So you're not just doing a generic treatment of a tune, as you had said, just with the chords and strumming, you know. So you're bringing some element of depth and uniqueness to each tune.
Yeah, maybe a little theater.
Yeah.
a little theater, a little emotion. That's a little. I always felt that if it could be a little cinematic, or being able to bring something visual to your mind as you hear it, that'd be great. You know, that kind of thing. So yeah, and then at that point, then you don't really have to have the limits of some pop music genre or any genre really. You say, well, what do you want to do? You want to evoke some sort of feeling. You know, you can
create an atmosphere.
Yeah, you can do that. You know, and that's the beauty of playing with microphones and seeing what you can do with that, and seeing, you know, like going out there and build a teepee with sticks and hit those sticks with it, and then build up a sound of like an army marching to these sticks. Or you might not have noticed it, but there's a tune on the Optimistic where I got some knives, and during this drum solo guitar thing, like you're sharpening the knife, you know. And there was another part where I was able to I turned on the shower and a microphone. I mic'd the shower, and so during this part where the guitar solo is happening, you suddenly hear this water spraying, and it kind of adds even more sizzle to the sound.
Interesting.
And so sometimes you may not even know it, but you feel it, and that's what I wanted. You know,
Very cool.
Nothing to take you out. You don't want a distraction from the song. You want like every part of it to be like more and more reinforcing what this little world that you're building is. Yeah.
So likewise with your investigating guitars and different strengths that each had to offer, and that enabled you to realize a certain sound you were going for. You also mentioned microphones, so this was part of your engineering growth, where you were really examining and understanding things. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, I really didn't have a lot at the time when we started out. I knew I needed basically a new rig. I had been working on the old Pro Tools Elif, which is from, you know, at this point would have been like 12 years old or something. And so I started with, okay, I'm going to get a new computer. This is not very exciting stuff, but like get a new computer, get the AV converter, and get, you know, a decent microphone. So, you know, with a little bit of research and really talking with friends, people who know things about, you know, what mics are good, so on and so forth. I think I just picked up a Neumann TLM 103, which is a kind of it's a great microphone. I mean, it works great, but you don't have to blow like, you know, $3,000 to get one, which is great. So I started with a good condenser. I had a KSM 32, which is just kind of a basic Shure mic, but it's nice and relatively flat. And then along the way, I had a really great opportunity to work again with the Amelia on it was the Tasty Guide to a Healthy Planet theme song. And so she took me to Kevin Peckham's house, and Kevin Peckham is you know, he's got the whole, you know, multiple recording consoles. If there's a classic mic, he's got 3 of them. You know what I mean? It's just like he's got all this stuff. He knew all about all this stuff, and so he guided me as like, oh, well, if you got a good condenser mic, maybe you might think about getting a cool ribbon mic. So, and he allowed me to come over and test out a bunch of different ribbon mics, and so I found this one called an AEA N22. And AEA I think it's a company in California, and they're making remake or versions, or at least kind of that's where their starting point is, remaking these old RCA mics. So you might have seen Frank Sinatra singing through one, and they're very famous. So I got one that was a much newer model, kind of looks like a lightsaber, and it is shielded for close miking, which is great, because normally, you know, you don't want to blow on the mic. I mean, it'll break the ribbon. So, but this is shielded, so I could put it on the guitar amp. I could put it close to the guitar, and I got some great sounds with it. So then combining that with the condenser, a lot of the times for different guitars or different instruments, I could get the clarity of the close-up microphone, and I could get the room sound by having the condenser in the back there, which really kind of then enters into the whole factor of just what the rooms in my houses sounded like, you know, at different times. There are 3 different places, including the home that we are in now, that I recorded some things in, and it's very cool. Wooden floors, that kind of thing, different shaped rooms, so on and so forth.
So then again, it was really not relying on outboard kind of digital effects or other things, but basically investigating a natural acoustic environment in order to arrive at the most honest and immediate sound.
Yeah, that's the name of the game for the entire thing. I didn't want to rely on anything. It's almost kind of like a beautiful situation of having the limitation of not really having access to a lot of stuff anyway, you know? So it's like, well, I'm very much in love with the sound of acoustic guitar, and I wanted that to be the foundation, of course, in voice, and I just wanted it to feel like you're in the room. I wanted to feel like you're in the you're right there, and there's no extra effects and psychedelia that is, imposed by some technology or whatever, some toys. There's not a lot of toys. There's really none. I mean, there's no reverb on the entire record. There's no effects of any kind. The only thing is EQ and compression.
Yeah, so it's interesting. That reminds me of outstanding examples in the history of rock where, like on Bridge Over Troubled Waters, the recording of drums in an elevator shaft. I think Led Zeppelin also had a house they were recording in, and they did some things with the rooms in order to get the effects and just use the environment that they were in.
Or the castle, perhaps.
Right. That's right. Yeah.
So then you can kind of play with that kind of thing. I mean, even in the beginning when I first started doing tracks, I was putting a mic close and another mic further away, even for vocals, which really didn't work, So it's an experiment. Sometimes it didn't work. There was one song where it did work, and so I kept it, and it was kind of interesting. We had a space where it was a very small room that was really just a hallway between a kitchen, 2 bedrooms, a bathroom, and like a living room, right?
Okay.
And so I closed all the doors. They're all these just old wooden doors. You got wood floor, and that was all the walls were wood and the floor was wood. I was like, oh, I'm gonna play. It's gonna get this great sound with all this wood in there. It's gonna sound great. Well, that was too much wood, and it was almost like too muddy, kind of too muffly for the most part. But there was a vocal track I did in there that was actually pretty cool. There's a couple other things that were kind of borderline. So, you have to do the experiment. You have no idea what it's going to be like. You just kind of have this little fantasy of like, oh, wouldn't it be cool to record in here and see what this sounds like? There's a little, I don't know, nostalgia for old times. Like our house is built in 1949. It's like, oh, awesome, old wood floors. Let's see what it, kind of go for that rootsy sound or whatever it is. And then the ceilings are angled in different ways because of the roof. So there's a lot of strange angles in there, and you just kind of, you know what it feels like to just play in a room like that, and so then to go for trying to capture that with the microphones that was what I wanted to do. And there were times when I went back and I'm listening, for months to a track, and I'm like, man, I never really getting what's happening with this thing. And then I look at the guitar, and there's two different tracks because one mic close, one mic far. The mic far wasn't doing anything for the sound. I get rid of it and here it is. For this particular tune, just having that guitar right up in your face was perfectly fine. It didn't have to sound like a room.
So a lot of it was there was a lot of experimentation, and there's a learning process, and then you come with a greater knowledge and getting, and also a memory of associating certain setup with the certain sound that's in your mind's ear, so that you know what to go for if you're in the process or at some future point, what to do.
Yeah, I mean, you learn the microphones, and you learn the preamps, and you learn the guitars too. I mean, I gotta say that if I could go back and change anything, or just have brought this into my practice when I was recording it, was I wish I would have made sure that the guitar strings on all the guitars were always at least 10 days old, 2 weeks old, to kind of get some of that new shimmer off of them, which is, it's just not a good sound. And that's when you start to hear just the real guitar, and without a lot of the extra, just the, I don't know, just this strange frequency not pleasing. And then also to play the guitar for a half hour first, because that wood opens up, and it just sounds stiff and sort of strange. And actually, I mean, things turned out really, really well. But there's one particular tune in there that I always listen back and like, damn, I really wish I would have, just jammed on that thing for a half an hour first. But sometimes it'd be like, okay, I've got an hour and a half, let's go get this done. And so the idea of like sitting around kind of playing rather than going and recording right away. I mean, I didn't think of it. I didn't think of it as important, or even, I didn't even really know that was part of the sonic quality of a guitar, that it would even change over that amount of time until after quite some time of getting to know the instrument. So yeah, acoustic guitar, I mean, really it was a new thing for me, so the whole thing was like putting myself through school, on a lot of different levels.
Yeah, which is, I mean, when I first met you, which is about 20 years ago, I know that you had as a younger person in your high school years played rock guitar, and then when I first met you, we were playing jazz together.
Right.
And then, and so it's so interesting to me that you then had veered towards this country music and a country band in the Fingers, and it's just what a wide range of musical taste and aesthetic aesthetics that you have.
Yeah, well, a lot of that I'd have to credit both Luke Sather, known currently as Luke Arvid, on the stage. He got me into Wilco in the early days, which is this like mid '90s, and so then I was kind of hooked on that kind of thing, the Wilco and Jayhawks and Golden Smog and these kind of like rootsy kind of bands back in that day during that era. So that was sitting there, and every time that I would be around him, he always had like a nice acoustic guitar, and I'd play it and like, man, this feels good, this is awesome, and stick in the back of my mind, and then go on and do whatever we would do, and then come back and man, this guitar feels really good, he had great taste, and he has great taste in guitars. He's very
neat.
Kind of got me going like, oh, that's really cool. And then also during this time when I was living at Amelia's place, she was doing her acoustic stuff. This is after I came back from living in Greece. She was doing her acoustic stuff, and so she just had that stuff up there. So she she had it there, and it was like, to have access to that in your house is awesome. So I said, anytime, just kind of playing around with it. It was like the one in particular I'm thinking of is she had some old Fender acoustic guitar that maybe belonged to her dad or something like that. But just a great sound, just big, thick baseball bat like neck, and you just playing it, just big strings, and yeah, it was awesome. So yeah, just having access to that kind of thing, and then you go, the gears start turning, and ideas start coming, and so in making the Optimistic, it was to have a couple of tunes playing acoustic guitar, Middle East, and then this country tune that I wrote with Joy Draglin, A Farmer and a Ballerina. That was, and so it's kind of the beginning of putting country type music in there, into the mix, so to speak. And then I guess the pattern that I've noticed is that every record would be a little bit varied, and then the strongest elements of that record ended up becoming the next record. For me, it was like a couple of the acoustic songs always had the biggest sound. So then making that the main foundation of the Fingers, for me anyway, from my point of view, and then with that, certain aspects of that becoming foundation for this album.
Now there's the actual material. When you write a song, is there usually an order in which things happen? Do you have a inspiration for lyrics, or do you come up with a music motif, or what's the thing that starts a song for you?
Yeah, it could go any which way. Yeah, I mean, I sometimes I'll just I can have really my favorite version of songwriting is just putting a little recorder in front and then just babbling into it. I had some really good luck with that where here's the microphone, pressing record, the computer's rolling, and I'm just playing, literally just improvising kind of in that moment, and then saying some stuff, and then just making it rhyme and having a melody, and most of the time it was nonsense. But then later on, you go back and listen again, and like, man, there's something in there. It's got this kind of vibe. And what if you change this word to that word? Oh my God, that's suddenly this meaning of this whole thing would come out of it. And that's kind of the beauty of language, I think. It's like you can put, a word contains a lot of conceptual information. Yeah. And you just change one word with another word, and suddenly this whole thing turns inside out, or you could go wherever. So that was very fun, because then you could listen, but also by doing it that way, you get a little bit more of like a pure energy in the lyric, like whatever it is that you really wanted to have come out will come out, because it's more uncensored. You don't have time to sit there and be like, oh, this is kind of dumb. What if I wrote this thing? You kind of get the mind out of the way, and you just go for it.
So it's more your subconscious, in a way, kind of generating things, and
yeah, I think so.
It's trusting your intuition.
Yeah,
that's really interesting.
Yeah, and then later on you go and you can edit. Then later on, and so basically, I mean, my feeling is that it's always about being in the zone, whatever you're doing. Whenever you have just like the critical mind in play, then it's usually in the way, and nothing's really going to happen. But if you're in the zone with it, you get this inspiration, and so the energy's there.
Yeah.
And whether it's there, it can be there in the beginning, but maybe the channel is not super clear. So whatever the vibe was that was going to come through, it's not accurate, or it's not exactly what it should be. And then later on, you get inspired again, maybe to take another swing at it, and you like, oh man, I got this idea. What if it did? And it's just kind of coming through, and it's kind of like like painting. You do multiple coats. And just kind of give yourself more time over it, and then you just take it as far as the energy or the inspiration goes, and then you quit.
And what's interesting is to have in your process, and it's something I would imagine you learn over time if you're observing yourself, is that those moments when you're in that kind of moment, and you recognize the quality of that moment, and then you also realize when you're no longer in that moment, and you kind of, okay, time to give it a rest. But it also reminds me of when, like they talk about with jazz musicians going into the studio, and they say usually it's the first, second take. There's the spontaneity, there's all the real blood flow, it's alive, and then when you start repeating takes, the mind starts engaging, and you're suddenly self-conscious, and you're trying to imitate or recapture the original spontaneity, and it's kind of lost.
Yeah, I think so, because there's always the inner critique, the judgment that comes in. So yeah, I mean, I almost feel like maybe the best thing would be if you get into the zone, it's best if you don't recognize that you're in it. And just
yes, absolutely. I understand, because the reaction would be, oh, this precious thing is happening,
exactly,
and will I ruin it? And already you're like engaged in it. It's almost like the what is it, the high the uncertainty. Once you observe a particle in physics, then you've tainted it. Heisenberg,
sure.
yeah, uncertainty principle, whatever. So it's the same thing with the mind. It's like,
well, that's how that's that's where you want to be. That's where you want to be beyond that. If you can.
Yeah. So so there's another thing that came to mind that I was thinking of, and you said Scott, who you'd worked on the Takeoff on, was the vocalist, basically. Yep. And Scott, so now he wasn't around, and you said, well, I'm going to write this stuff. I've got to figure out how to sing. Yeah. And that was also something that I witnessed over time, where you had to locate, and it seemed, to my observation, you had to find your singing voice. And was that a physical process? I mean,
oh yeah.
And is it trying to find what you're doing with your throat? I mean, what is it? How is it you arrive at?
Yeah, just I had to have some space to experiment and just try and just see what happens if you like. What happens if I try to belt this lyric like I'm singing, you know, like rock and roll or whatever.
That would have been fun to have like a historic
yeah,
version 1.
Wouldn't that be? Oh god.
And like no.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, I think that for me it was in the car first. That was the best thing.
Yeah, you had mentioned to me that singing in the car.
And just putting something on and just belt it out and just see what happens, you know. And at least there it's private relatively, except for the guy who drives next to you and is like, what the fuck? You know. So yeah, there was that, and then another just serendipitous situation where I had a spring semester. Well, at this point I wasn't in school anymore, but I had a spring semester where my roommate moved to Bolivia. So I had this whole place to myself, and it was awesome. I had the roads there, I had the guitar and the amp and the system, and so I just wake up every day and you know, spend some time just tracking and then singing stuff and just trying it out, or playing the roads and just like, you know, going for it, hoping that my upstairs neighbors weren't gonna go crazy, and they did a couple times. I'm like, oh, okay, got it, okay, you know. Yeah, neighbors are tricky for when you're trying to do high volume things.
Yeah.
I remember once I over at Spate Street, I got my amplifier back from the shop up on the 3rd floor. I was like, just for a second, I just want to see what happens. I just cranked the crap out of it, like the crazy feedback and whammy. Just wanted to see if I could get that. And I hear this voice from down on the row. It's like, I appreciate you wanting to play your music. I live 3 doors down and I'm trying to watch TV. I'm like, oh, sorry.
Okay.
So yeah, you got to be considerate. But yeah, so you just you keep trying different things. You know, what happens if you sing quiet? What happens if you sing loud? I haven't tried to do anything with the teacher. I probably should, you know, just to get a couple foundational things going. But I did get happy with my tone, which is really nice. It felt good. Like after a while, I started to kind of get some sense of conditioning happening there, where I was like, you know, I got a sound, and I felt pretty good with that. So, and then, you know, and then it just, everything has to do with balancing your tone, balancing your volume. You know, if you play by yourself with an acoustic guitar, it's really easy for that acoustic guitar maybe to be too loud for your voice, or maybe you find a way that you can sound good belting out something, you know, if it's going to be at a higher volume, and it's and so you work with that. You know, some guitars are very quiet, some are pretty loud. I've actually got a loud one that I've been noticing. It's just like a bluegrass cannon, and it's awesome, but then when I'm singing to it, it's like I have to scale it back a little bit. And so I never thought that there would be a possibility to have an acoustic guitar be too loud, because it was always the issue of getting something that's resonant and big enough to sound, you know, satisfying, because most guitars don't sound, they don't project it, they don't have like a very large sound, you know. So yeah, so just trying to figure that one out, and how to sound good. So and what it really comes down to, just practicing and playing and allowing yourself to spend time doing that. Not requiring of yourself to have a product, to have a song, to have anything whatsoever, or to have any result from your practice session. You just be in the space, just allowing yourself to have the time to do it, and then little by little you'll start to come to different, even just like little micromuscular decisions, you know. And then next thing you know, you've got, oh, this is a pleasing sound. It sounds pretty good. It's okay.
So you just mentioned about having the time to do it. So that was something else I also noticed in your life, where you were pretty active, you know, on the jazz music scene playing, and then like, wow, you know, you were like laying low. You were not playing every gig, or, you know, making some choices. And was that basically serving the purpose of having more time to work on the projects that you wanted, that were personal?
Yeah, definitely. Because I felt like after spending, you know, some hours a day teaching on the guitar, and then going and playing some of those performances that some of them were amazing, and then some of them would be less. You know how it is in this in Madison, where the certain opportunities to play, to work, and to make money doing it are less than ideal for actually making music. You know, so after a while, oh man, I did so many things that ultimately I just was not happy doing it. So I was like, I'm not going to do this anymore. So I think the first thing was like stopping playing like weddings, and like those kind of things, unless they paid awesome money. Because then I'm okay, fine. If we're gonna get great money, that I'll spend some hours doing it. But after a while, you just don't even want to play music anymore. You get into those situations where it's like you're putting the energy out and nothing is coming back because it's not even really valued. You're just wallpaper.
And also, isn't it that the actual process of growth and realization that are required of doing a project actually necessitates having large expanses of time where you can kind of have the time to explore. I mean, I think about all the things you had to undertake, and I'm a musician. My tendency is I always want to be working on music. And the idea that, oh wow, I'm going to work on engineering and microphones and stuff, and I have to investigate buying equipment and doing other things. It's kind of like you have to have the big picture that you're serving, because I would understand as a musician, I would imagine one's compulsion is just you want to work on music. You just want to do music. So you had to have a certain drive and organization and.
Yeah, I just I got into it. I think the beginning was just the fact that you could have a home studio. This started for me, I think for a lot of people in 2000, when you could have Pro Tools in your house and you could do multi-tracking and it could actually sound really pretty good. And so then you could have ideas, you could play them into the computer, you could listen back to them objectively, kind of. Like you could kind of put yourself in the position of, does this sound interesting to me? Does this sound fascinating? Am I intrigued still? You could make decisions. You'd be like, you know what, wouldn't it be cool if this section was half as long or twice as long or whatever? And you could go in there and you could change it and you could do things. So at least in terms of composing, it was fantastic. And then having the experience of hearing what playing an instrument back at you after having gone through the microphones and all that kind of stuff, and I got pretty fascinated with that, and so then you get into this, and then you start looking at like what do these microphones kind of, how do they interpret the sound, and then also they go through these mic preamps. Let's look at what can you do with that. And dealing with amplifiers for electric guitars, there are certain things that are really awesome, like an old Fender tube amp, for instance. Tube amps, okay, I'm into tube amps. Okay, and then what else? Microphone preamps, tube amps, and then old mics, or just microphones that capture that kind of sound. I guess I got into a purist thing in terms of just kind of having a fantasy of what it probably might have been like to make music back before there were so many toys, and then just hearing it and just that kind of natural thing where you're just moved by less, like when you hear a recording of somebody just playing, and there's not like tons of sounds, it's not like 3 guitars and lots of synthesizers and effects and this and that or whatever. So I kind of went through that with the Takeoff, and that was fun. Kind of having like it's like it could be anything. It could do all these kind of things, and get the these crazy sounds on the Fender Rhodes, going through these new effects that we could have, and da 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 da. But after a while, it became like this ear candy that didn't. It was like it didn't sustain. It's like you go back and you listen to some things that are like, it's basically with technology. You go and you listen to this sound, and it's this new sound because of the new technology. Okay, cool. And then 5 years later, it's like this dated sound.
Yeah,
it's not timeless at all.
You've mentioned it. We listen to things from the '80s with the synths, and the various, and there's a camp element to it now because it's
Yeah.
like, you know, it certainly dates it.
Right. And so I wanted something where it was like, well, if I'm going to put the time into some music, I'd like it to just feel like it's like I want it to feel, but always make it feel that way. So in a way, it's kind of like by having those limitations, self-imposed in a way, but also they're pretty convenient when it's like, well, I'm not going to go, blow $30,000 to make a record anyway. You know, might as well just kind of go with that. Go with something simple. Have it be based on the actual playing. Have it be based on actually, here's what I do just as a person, rather than this huge studio thing where there's all these different elements. And it's kind of turned into that anyway. Without, it's like I wanted this album to be super solo, and it still ended up turning into sounding like 4-piece band, But by at least starting from that premise, it helped to limit it and getting the sound of like one thing and having it be really big, no extra stuff to take up the space. I mean, it can be just immense. And I gotta say, my one of the big inspirations for just hearing that kind of thing, or the idea of a few instruments sounding super huge, was the first and the third and a little bit of the second White Stripes album back in 2002.
I knew you were going to say
that. It was amazing. I was like, holy crap, one guitar, I think he double tracked a guitar, okay, but there was no bass, and then just big drums and one vocal, and that was it. And it was the biggest sound you ever heard. I mean, it's just it really did it. It was just amazing. So I was like, wow, okay, so fewer instruments. That was a great lesson. And so that's the deal. So now when you just hear a guitar and it's just like right there, and for me to hear the acoustic guitar, it's the simplicity, but it's lush because it's Mother Nature, and this wood is so great.
Yeah, so that struck a note with me now, because it's kind of like, well, you're dealing with not multiple references in a dense instrumentation or with a lot of effects, but you're giving the sonic image of some simple thing, but you're going to go into the richest depth that you can draw from it to bring out its beauty and its compelling qualities. So that in a way, for me, as not being as involved in the engineering aspect and wondering somewhat skeptically, okay, it's like those guys who have these amazing stereo systems. Do you really need that? I can listen and be pleasured by just this more modest thing, but when you're actually creating something and recording it, I could understand then how you're delving into right off trying to bring the greatest depth to the simple, iconic kind of instrument or whatever the thing you're dealing with. So that was a revelation for me.
And it's really about the beauty of a good instrument, which is credit going to one Mother Nature for this amazing vibrational quality in these woods, and the guys who made these things, like they found this sound, or whatever the instrument was. Some sounds have these beautiful lush overtones, and it's like when I first got my Collings OM, you know how you get something, like, oh, I'm really excited, I got this new thing or whatever. I mean, I put that thing in the back of my car, realizing I just put that on my credit card, and I'm like kind of stressed all the way home. And so anyway, and there were times when I just sit there and look at it, like I don't even want to pick it up. I'm like afraid to touch it, because it's the most expensive thing I'd ever bought, But so as I'd play it, and it was like you went to church. It was like the choir singing out of this thing. It was so beautiful, And then there's guitars that are more based on this kind of fundamental frequency rich. It's kind of like there's not a lot of overtones. It's just this really fundamental, punchy, old style sound. That's more like now you're in the kitchen and you're just playing, and it just feels great. And then playing around with that, maybe depending on the song, or depending on your voice, or where you're singing, or maybe you have them both and they can satisfy different areas in the mix,
Mm-hmm.
you know, that kind of thing. And so yeah, it's just incredible. So I went down the rabbit hole with guitars, certain guitars that did one thing and did different thing, and some that were great for finger picking, some that were great for strumming and really digging into it, and you can really hit it hard. Some that were great for playing leads, and so that you could play with kind of a minimal amount of exertion, and you could get this great sound to come out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so they all kind of do a different thing, and then kind of going and exploring that, because I mean, we've got now, you know, more than 100 years of American guitar making, and they've really, there's this whole beautiful history and a legacy that's there, and modern luthiers are trying to recreate that, and some of them are doing a better job. I mean, it's really incredible what they're doing now. It's like they got it, they figured it out. They're still going to take some time for those woods to open up and to age, you know, so that for them to sound, you know, like an older guitar. But it's just incredible. And so that kind of natural thing, and yeah, it'll be beautiful. So that if the world ends and you no longer have electricity because the solar flare, you know, hit Mother Earth, and we're out, you'll still have an acoustic guitar you can play and just hang out. And keep on going.
Yeah. Well, I just have to say, you have asked me over a period of time to check out mixes and you know, finally getting down to final versions of tunes that are on this album, and it's just been great for me. The most, I don't know what adjective to find, happy thing for me is when I hear the material. There isn't any thought process. Immediately I'm moved, I'm drawn to what I'm hearing, and I'm smiling. You know, it's just a reflex response, reflexive, and I don't know, it just makes me really happy. I feel happy for me experiencing it, and I feel happy having known you all this time. You know, yeah, you hit the mark, and it was like, yeah, what a great thing.
Yeah.
I think you've written some just great tunes. They stay with me. I never tire. I want to go back and listen again. The effect of them doesn't wear off. I listen to it and it moves me the same way, which says it's huge.
That's great.
You know, so
well, I gotta say, I mean, a lot of the choices that are made through all these processes come from us sitting around at your piano and you explaining some things that I never would have known. You know, for instance, like you brought this idea to me about that you attributed to George Martin from the Beatles, about how, you know, you've heard this part and you're going to hear the repetition of this section again, but they'll put an element in there to wake up the audience just a little bit, that kind of thing. And really kind of bringing in that element. Like, for instance, when I would play it for you, and you could listen to it then from kind of a more objective place, because you're not, you know, you here's this piece of music you never heard, and then you could say, here's what I think, here's when I'm moved, here's when I'm not moved, and here was my feeling when I wasn't moved, because, you know, it was, I remember one time you were saying, it's like you told a joke and you gave the punchline, and then you told the same joke and gave the same punchline again, you know, that kind of thing. And like, okay, you know, and so that would be like, okay, then I'll try something else, or I can, it's cool to kind of get that idea that somebody could have a particular feeling about it. And then I'd listen back and you know, I go, oh, okay, now that's kind of, okay, I input that into the program. Now I get this idea, and it was like, okay, now every time I could do a thing, and I could listen back to my idea and then go like, I'm going to try this concept that you introduced me to. It's like, try something a little bit different. You know, so in one sense, staying with the thread or the initial energy of the song, but then giving a little bit something to keep you interested, you know, but also not to do non sequiturs and kind of attention deficit type decisions, which make no sense, because that's usually where the mental aspect comes in and ruins it, you know. So always trying to keep the heart, the thread to the heart is always there, and then something to kind of keep it flavorful.
Right. Yeah, I've actually had the experience of hearing material that was in a more stripped down form by some talent that I thought was really compelling, and then there's an album made of it, and I'm eager to hear it, and then my heart's crushed because the treatment of it on the album has just totally sapped it of what it was that was so special about it. And you figure, I don't know, I mean,
Right,
it's just
right.
it wasn't treated well.
Right, right.
And it's a real learning lesson.
Yeah, it happens a lot, you know. It's and I'm not sure what the intentions are that create the ideas that make somebody want to do things to the music. Like, oh, it's this thing, but you know, if you really want it to be successful, we got to do this thing to it, and that
Right,
thing to
so
it.
I think
it should be like that because that's what's cool. Or who knows
producer.
What, you know? Yeah, you can
that
ruin
often
it.
is the thing that intercedes and ruins it. And I think it has to be somebody an artist that has a strong idea of what it is that they want. And I think that's, in a way, trusting your mind's ear and hearing and listening in your mind. Also, keeping in touch with the initial spark of intimacy that you had with what was written, you know, and because that's something vital, and you don't want to ruin it. So you have to figure out how to this other stuff should support it and not be glommed on top of it, you know. So
you know, it's funny that you mentioned that. I think that's a big a good reason to have these little field recordings of the ideas as they come through, which I don't know where. I think it started with tape recorder for me. I had tape recorder all the way back in just before starting to do recording with I don't know, man, maybe like mid 90s or something like that. Little ideas recording on the tape recorder, and then you could go back and you could listen to it. But what was really fun is that you'd have an idea, like for me personally, I'd have an idea, record it in there, and then forget about it, because maybe I'll have time to work on this later, because you never know when an idea is going to hit, and sometimes you hit it and it's not particularly convenient, so then you record it in there, let it go, and forget about it. You do that over and over again, and then at some point you're like, man, I got like 45 minutes, I got an hour of recordings of these ideas. Then go take a walk with it. That's so great. You know, that's the thing is my favorite Tuesday night thing was to come down to the jam session at the Cardinal via walking all the way there from my house through the bike path with the headphones on, just listening to whatever ideas were there. So I've got banks and banks of these old ideas. And what's great too is that like it would allow me to also go back and revisit what it sounded like in the beginning, because I might have made changes, and I go back and I'm like, man, I don't know, maybe this original idea's got something. Maybe it's even maybe I bypassed something that was quite potent for some other idea, and maybe I should go back and get back to the original thing, or maybe the melody actually was better the first time, or whatever it was.
I hear, yeah.
But yeah, and then the Adderalls, and of course the phones now make it very easy.
Yeah, I definitely relate to what you're saying. I've gone back to an original take of something that I just was the first time really I went through it, and it could be a couple of years later or whatever, and I already have the tune written out and ready to play, and I've played it, but I go back to the original and it's somewhat different, and I go, wow, that was so great, that one thing, and I just completely had forgotten or missed it,
or just something else came up and you went that direction, but what if I had gone this direction? And then
so it is worthwhile having, again, that I don't know, there's something to be said about initial energy and meeting with something. It's something vital.
Yeah, and spending the time to listen again. Like you're going back and listening to something, like meaning that you're literally you may be spending time coming up with an idea and practicing and playing. You recorded it. Now you're going to spend that same amount of time again when you go back and listen to it, maybe even multiple times. Yeah, you do have to give yourself a lot of time and allow yourself that. And man, I mean, if I'm just so happy I didn't go down the 9-to-5 route. you know,
Yeah.
because it would have just been really, I don't know how you do that, because then you do that and then we get,
Yeah,
I don't know, it just takes up your whole day. Next thing you know, you never take time for this process, you know.
Yeah, I don't think it affords that kind of, and you have to figure out how to walk that line and make things work out.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, super cool. Well, thanks for listening to it and giving me feedback on things. And I think I've always felt that you're the executive producer on all of these records. I think that's how it's credited.
Yeah.
It's awesome because it's just like, what do you say, boss? Is this, what do you think of this one? And if Paul signs off on it, then I know it's good, and I don't worry about what anybody else thinks. So.
Don't touch. But anyway, I tried to give it my best awareness and you know. So yeah.
Cool.
Cool.
All right. Well, that's all, folks. Thanks for listening.